In the mountains, completely dark, I was dragged by the arm and thrown out of the car.
Don't you ever come back, you parasitic leech.
Camping sounds fun, doesn't it?
My husband and mother-in-law said this from the open car window, laughing together. Then, the car sped away in an instant. If only I could fly away. Today, I was looking outside through the window again. My name is Allison, 30 years old. I am married to Kevin, 32 years old. We live together with my mother-in-law, Mary. My parents have passed away in an accident, leaving me with no other family. I worked as an office worker and continued to do so after getting married. But after moving in together, I suddenly developed asthma. The condition became severe, and I was no longer able to work.
I did say I liked reserved women, but I never said I liked them to be reserved health-wise, too.
My husband said, in an annoyed tone, as soon as he got home. His criticism seemed harsher than usual, so I sensed it. Today is, oh, I see, the last day of the month, payday.
Normally, if both of us were working, we should be living a richer life than most, right? How did it come to this? Thinking about how much is taken for bills and taxes on payday sucks.
My husband is particularly irritable on paydays. He shows his annoyance. Well, even if he said that, and he aired his dissatisfaction, he lit a cigarette and took a deep inhale, then exhaled the accumulated smoke. I choked on the smoke from the American spirit. Even just the smoke filling the room was tough on me, making me feel like I was being turned into a smoked ham. Then, my mother-in-law did the same, lighting up her Marlboro that was on the table, inhaling deeply, and exhaling the smoke like him. Why do they have to be so similar in this regard? I coughed again. The cigarette brands used by my husband and mother-in-law were different, making me feel like I was being smoked with a mix of mesquite and applewood chips. Oh, Ham, now I understand how you feel. Watching me, they both became clearly more annoyed. There you go, coughing again. This had become a monthly payday ritual. We wish you could earn at least enough to cover our cigarette expenses, right? You're exaggerating. You're coughing all the time with asthma anyways, aren't you? Every day with your constant coughing and wheezing. It's so annoying. What a useless spender you are. With another puff, a white cloud of smoke emerged from my mother-in-law's mouth. A payday monthly event. The ritual of smoking out the wife while berating her inability to work in her illness was nothing but torment for me. Come to think of it, I should have questioned this from the start. Is asthma really something that prevents one from working? It's just a cough, right? One evening, my mother-in-law started saying this. Apparently, out of cigarettes, she pulled out her wallet to go buy some new ones, only to discover there wasn't enough money to do so, which started her irritation. But a cough and asthma are entirely different things. My mother-in-law continued. The reason you were hospitalized last year was because the doctor wanted to make money by convincing you. Because who gets hospitalized just for a cough? If you ask around the neighborhood, who would believe such a foolish story? That is, certainly, it's true that I became unable to work. And it's also true that the income we could have expected from my work was lost. Being someone who generally doesn't talk back, I had no choice but to listen to such unreasonable harsh words from my mother-in-law. But then my husband added insult to injury.
I agree.
He nodded.
Just for a cough, you get loads of medicine. And it's not just once, it continues endlessly. Frequent hospital visits, too. Why should we have to be involved in your hobby and the doctor's way to make money?
He fumbled in his chest pocket. Apparently he wanted a cigarette. It seemed there were a few cigarettes left, but even missing a few was enough to irritate him during such discussions. He tapped his foot vigorously. Oh! As if struck by an idea, my mother-in-law headed towards my bag. She grabbed my everyday shoulder bag, then unzipped it. Holding it with both hands, she raised it towards the ceiling, and then turned the widely opened mouth of the bag upside down. Everything inside, rapidly losing altitude, was dumped onto the floor. The contents hit the floor and scattered in various directions. From among the scattered heap, my mother-in-law directly reached for my wallet. What? I felt as if my privacy had been exposed, shocked by the intrusion. Is she going for cigarette money? But my mother-in-law's next move surpassed my expectations.
For just a cough, going to the hospital is ridiculous. This wasteful behavior must be corrected, you degenerate wife.
She shouted, and from the wallet, not a bill or coin, but she pulled out my health insurance card. What? The target was so far from what I had imagined. My health insurance card? I was at a loss for words. Ignoring my stunned, frozen state, my mother-in-law took further action. Still holding the health insurance card, she went straight to the drawer where my medication was stored, opened the drawer, and then grabbed and pulled out a month's worth of my medication. Returning to the living room, she shouted at me, "For just a cough, you've bought too much medicine. There's a limit to luxury. Spending so much money for these ineffective medicines. For a cough, there are plenty of throat lozenges at the supermarket, so just suck on those." After ranting all at once, she dumped the medicine and health insurance card into the trash can filled with food scraps.
Oh, my lifeline.
My face turned pale.
Well, they say the start is the hardest part of quitting smoking. Same goes for medicine, so hang in there.
My husband grinned.
They say quitting starts with candy, too. Everything starts with candy.
I received advice on how to quit medicine from people who can't quit smoking themselves.
Man, your words hit different. I feel the love. Ah, and while you're at it, pass me some money for some cigarettes from that wallet.
Okay, I guess I'll take some too.
$20 was taken from the wallet, and the wallet was carelessly thrown back onto the floor, scattered among the other spilled contents. On my knees, I began returning the contents to my bag, wondering what I would do if an asthma attack occurred tomorrow. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and husband praised each other for disposing of the medicine and taking the cigarette money from my wallet. I want to fly away. I want to escape from this place. However, discarding the medicine and health insurance card and forbidding hospital visits were not enough to satisfy my mother-in-law and husband.
Think about it. There's no reason to support an unemployed burden just because we're married,
said my husband.
If she had her parents' home to go back to, you would have divorced already, right? I remember in an old book I read, if the female workers couldn't work anymore, they were sent back to their homes.
She added,
It's only because you have no relatives that we let you stay here to shelter from the rain and wind.
They started again. What? It's not that I'm here doing nothing. I handle all the household chores. It was unusual to talk back, but I felt I really must say this. In fact, I would prepare 2 meals worth of lunch boxes with him, both for lunch and dinner, and I did all the cleaning and laundry as well. My mother-in-law did not do any housework at all. But,
what are you saying? Housework isn't considered labor. If you were working and earning some money, we could hire a maid with the money and still have change left over.
Yes, a wife who just lingers around the house without even having children is useless.
They continued their discussion, and eventually it led to the notion that I should be grateful for just having a place to shelter.
How can you understand your place? If only we could leave her in the mountains.
Or maybe an island.
Or even bury her underground.
Such a half-serious discussion about abandoning me began. Beside them, I broke out in a cold sweat. The joke then became a frightening reality. My worst fears were realized. Indeed, my mother-in-law and husband actually left me behind.
Perhaps it's time you really understand your place. You should experience it for real. After all, experience is the best teacher.
Sounds like fun.
They joked around with an attitude similar to that of parents sending a child on a school excursion. wanting me to realize the gratitude I should be feeling for being allowed to stay at home. No, please. I resisted desperately. I really have asthma, and I couldn't survive if left behind. I truly am grateful for being allowed to stay at home. That's why I do so much housework. I pleaded. However,
if you were really grateful, you wouldn't be coughing so much and making so much noise, would you?
Seeing the night view would make you realize how fortunate you are. Maybe you should ponder about my future care overnight, too.
They retorted coldly. Thus, I was forcefully shoved into the car by my husband. Of course, by this point, my smartphone had been confiscated. After driving for 3 hours, I was pulled by the arm by my husband and thrown out of the car into a pitch-dark, unknown mountainous area. Returning to the driver's seat, he slammed the door shut. I ran and clung to the car, but he honked the horn as if to say, "Don't come any closer."
"Don't you ever come back, you parasitic leech."
Camping sounds fun, doesn't it?
From inside the car, my husband and mother-in-law said this through the open window.
"Please, wait a minute."
I cried out on the verge of tears, but my voice was ignored. With a merciless sound, the window closed, and then the car sped away in an instant. I watched the car's taillights disappear into the distance. When that light finally vanished, I looked around. There was no night view to be seen. There was not a single light. I wished I could fly. I looked up at the sky. In the pitch darkness, only the stars looked unusually beautiful. Without any lights, the sky seemed so beautifully close. I opened the zipper of the backpack, thrown out along with me. As I took out the contents, I took a deep breath. Having my smartphone taken away and being left in the mountains, I'm grateful being allowed to stay at home. I will live eating grass roots from now on. Please forgive me. I wondered if I should be on my knees to apologize to my husband and mother-in-law. I'd burned such plans of a husband and mother-in-law to the ground. It's time to fly. A few days later, I faced my husband and mother-in-law again. However, it was not at home. I was in a guest house. In a brightly lit room of a guest house, the new, clean walls reflected the sunlight, making the room appear even brighter. Such contrast to that night.
I saw it on TV.
Despite the reflected light, my husband began, trembling, with an ashen face that had gone beyond blue to almost black. On the contrary, I was in good spirits. Bright, just like today's weather. Well, I'm glad you did. Wasn't it good to hear some positive news?
Yeah.
I'll show it to you again. The owner of the guest house had kindly recorded it, and I deliberately played it on the TV for them. The morning news. A request for rescue by a drone. A rescue success. It was featured as a piece of uplifting news. On the screen,
"That was some impressive piloting."
I was being interviewed. I've always mainly done aerial photography as a hobby, so I was able to handle night flying without any trouble. I replied to the news reporter's further questions.
"When did you come up with the idea to attach a letter to a drone?"
Smiling, I answered, "I've been planning this since my husband and mother-in-law mentioned wanting to abandon me in the mountains." While showing them this interview, I looked down on the two of them shrinking in size. How does it feel to have your actions exposed to the entire country? My husband and mother-in-law's lips quivered.
"When did you become able to pilot a drone?"
My husband asked in a thin voice. I snorted through my nose. "Ever since you two started calling me useless, I've wanted to fly away." The desire to fly only grew after my health deteriorated, and I was subject to their verbal abuse. I frequently gazed up at the sky with a sigh. One day, I saw a drone documentary on TV, which I left on during housework, and that gave me hope. I secretly learned it with the money I had saved before marriage. I couldn't bring myself to tell my husband and mother-in-law, fearing they would say I had started another expensive hobby. I couldn't imagine telling you about my drone to somebody who took my health insurance card away from me. It was easy to imagine you taking it and crushing it. When I thought I was about to be abandoned, I sneaked a foldable drone into my backpack. I attached a letter requesting rescue to it and sent it flying. The person who picked it up was the owner of this guest house. Thus, I managed to get rescued, and the news covered it. The request for rescue by a drone was all over the news. Seeing me on the news and then having their actions exposed nationwide, my husband and mother-in-law appeared pale-faced. "Well, it's good that you came over here without hesitation," I said nonchalantly. Actually, there had been 2 shadows lurking behind my husband and mother-in-law. That's why they were so pale.
I didn't think it would become such a big deal,
my husband exclaimed. "Yeah, it's just a cough," my mother-in-law cried. At a level where you can enjoy camping." I laughed out loud at their utterly inadequate excuses, leaving me without consent, dragging me into the car, and then dragging me out of the car by force. My husband stumbled over his words. With the 2 of them at a loss of words, I gave a signal to the police officers. Then they approached them. Their shrinking figures were pressed down even further.
"I ask you to come to the police station with us." "What?"
they gasped, their mouths opening and closing like fish out of water. Unable to breathe in shock? I watched this scene and laughed. I've had asthma for a long time and haven't been able to breathe well myself. Now that the police are here, you understand, right? I boldly informed them of the magnitude of their actions. What you 2 did is not something that can be dismissed as a mere prank. Excessive, that's what you were. Oh, and by the way, throwing away my medicine is also an act of property damage. I was still not satisfied. And finally, I tell you about the things you repeatedly mentioned. I stroked the drone. You probably know this, but since the news, I've been talked about on TV and various other media. Thanks to that, my name has become well known, and I've had some sponsors approach me. Well, I guess it's thanks to your disdain that my desire to fly was realized and the aerial photos I took were recognized. So from now on, I'll live as an aerial drone photographer.
"What?"
What? The 2 of them looked like they were about to flip over in surprise, but that was not to be. 2 police officers were standing behind them.
"So you're saying you can make money now?"
my husband asked, out of breath. I answered that question for him. Yes, at least 3 times your monthly salary, too. Hearing this, my mother-in-law then clung to me. "I'm sorry, Allison. From now on, let's try to get along." Wow, it's the first time you called me by my name. Until now, you've always called me by, "Hey, you." Smiling for the first time today, I said, "Oh, I'm truly sorry. From now on, I'll make sure to call you by your name." I dismissed that notion without hesitation. Well, I refuse to live together. Cigarettes are bad for asthma. My husband, panicking, pulled a pack of cigarettes from his chest pocket and crushed it. Then, placed the crumpled box of cigarettes on the table between us as if it were a pledge.
"I won't smoke anymore, so please don't arrest us. And let's live together and support each other."
Are you joking? I meticulously placed the box of cigarettes back in my husband's chest pocket. Maybe you can manage by smoking into each other's faces from now on. Looking at the folded cigarettes that were no longer smokable, my husband let out a broken voice.
Ugh.
And so, my husband and mother-in-law were taken away by the police. Using their harassment as a reason, I received a substantial amount of alimony and divorced. Thanks to that news, I became an aerial photographer using drones. Since drones can shoot anywhere, I still live in this rural area where I've made connections after descending from that mountain. Having cut ties with my cigarette-blowing husband and mother-in-law, my asthma has somewhat improved. Of course, my medicines aren't thrown away anymore, and my treatment is going smoothly. From aerial photography, I have made further connections, and now I'm also participating in test flights for drone development projects. I can fly now, and I will continue to fly. I thought to myself, as I gripped the joystick of my drone's controller.
During a family trip, my husband and his mother tried to abandon my daughter and I in the mountains.
Today, I'm going to tell you something unbelievable that happened to my daughter and I. My name is Christina. I'm 37 years old. I work part-time at a supermarket. I live together with my husband Alec, who is 3 years older than me, my adorable daughter Magdalena, who is now in the 5th grade, and my mother-in-law. Our mother-in-law started living with us 2 years ago. After Alec's father passed away, my mother-in-law became so lonely that she would call Alec every day. We live in an apartment and don't have room for other people. So at first, Alec turned down his mother when she asked to move in with us, but she was persistent. One day, a bunch of boxes arrived at our door, and we found out that Alec's childhood home had been torn down. The next day, his mother appeared. "I don't have a home to return to. Please, let me live here." I never imagined she would want to live with us this badly. When she said that, my jaw dropped, and Alec was also obviously shocked. But Alec's mother was his soft spot, so he eventually agreed. I quickly expressed my disagreement, but my mother-in-law then said, "Aren't you going too far just because you and I aren't related by blood? I may be your in-law, but we're still family, and I'm still a mother. How can you be so cruel?" She then began to cry. Seeing his mother crying before his eyes, Alec's attitude suddenly changed, and he stood beside her, hugging her shoulders.
"If you're against this, leave. Our house is under my name. This is my home."
With her tears, my mother-in-law managed to frame me as the bad guy in this situation. She was able to cry anytime she thought it would benefit her. It was her special skill. It was decided Alec's mother would move in with us, but the next issue was where would she sleep? Our apartment had 3 bedrooms. One was Alec and I's bedroom, another was Magdalena's bedroom, and the third was Alec's workspace, or at least that's what we called his hobby room. That was it. In this situation, I thought it was only natural for us to make Alec's spare room into his mother's new bedroom. But she said she wanted Magdalena's room. "The sunlight in this room is really nice. That room is always so dark. I feel like I'll get sick if I live there." She wanted us to use all of Magdalena's furniture as well, which I obviously spoke out against. This is Magdalena's room. She really treasures this room and chose everything in it herself, even the curtains. What's wrong with me using it? Getting your own bedroom as an elementary schooler is very spoiled. I want to use this room no matter what. Why don't you turn that room into Magdalena's bedroom? Realizing his spare room was at risk, Alec immediately rejected.
"That's right. It's too early for a kid in elementary to have their own room. I recently watched a program on TV that said it's best for children to study in the living room, so Magdalena can start doing that. When it's time for bed, she can sleep in our room."
Magdalena seemed confused by the selfish things her dad and grandmother were saying. Though it's only natural for Magdalena to feel that way after seeing a grown adult throw a fit just because she wants to use her bedroom. Alec and his mother wouldn't listen to me no matter what I said. Ultimately, my mother-in-law went after Magdalena with so much force that Magdalena could do nothing but nod. That's the way our living together began, and as expected, she harassed me every day. "You only cook things loaded with carbs. Why don't you think about health a bit more?" Is what my mother-in-law complained about when I cooked spaghetti and garlic bread, as Magdalena had requested. "You aren't keeping up with the cleaning at all, huh? Using the fact that you work as an excuse to not do housework. You're such a crummy wife." After finding just a single strand of hair on the floor, she would accuse me of slacking on the chores. At first, she only did it when Alec wasn't around. But with time, she ended up doing it blatantly all day. Alec would never come to my aid, and Magdalena was scared of her grandmother. If I spoke up against my mother-in-law, her inner actress would come out, and she would begin to cry. There was nothing I could do. The other day, I had a chance to talk to our neighbors. They were complimenting you a lot, but I told them the truth. I told them how you don't care about cooking nutritional food, even though you have an elderly person living with you, and how you're sloppy with housework. She even spread bad rumors about me in our apartment building, so she had me completely cornered. Even when things went that far, Alec wasn't on my side. He even stopped eating the food I cooked, instead only eating the overly salty meals his mother prepared him. Though Alec was treating me very coldly, I was grateful I could live happily together with Magdalena. I did my best to use that to keep myself positive. Around that time, Magdalena hit puberty. I don't want to sleep in the same room as Dad. After she said that, Alec began sleeping alone in his hobby room. Magdalena gradually began avoiding her father. Seeing Magdalena reminded me of my own youth, so I took it all with a nostalgic smile. But Alec didn't feel that way.
What's with the way she avoids me? You must be doing something to her.
For some reason, he blamed me. Seeing that turned Magdalena against her dad even more, to the point where she would glare at him anytime she saw him. Dad, you're the worst. Stop bullying Mom. He was rejected by his own daughter, who used to be so quiet and sweet. I'm sure that shocked Alec. Then, to top it off, his mother began saying ridiculous things to him. This is because half of Magdalena's blood is Christina's. She's becoming cold-hearted like her mother. What are you talking about? She's a very good girl. I couldn't hold back my anger after hearing the way my mother-in-law insulted my precious daughter. Though Alec should have defended Magdalena, he instead glared at me.
That's right. I should have married a nicer woman. That was the biggest mistake of my life.
How could I not feel sad hearing that? The gap between Alec and I grew wider and wider. When the conflict between us reached its peak, Alec's mother suggested we go on a family trip. Your relationship's on the edge, isn't it? I can't just sit back and watch this anymore. Let's go to a mountain resort and refresh ourselves. Whose fault do you think this is? Give me a break. There's nothing I'd rather do less than go on a trip with you, is what I was screaming deep down in my heart, but Alec immediately agreed with his mother's plan. I wasn't in the mood to argue, so I glanced over at Magdalena, who was naturally sitting next to me. Probably thanks to the atmosphere at home, Magdalena has grown very good at understanding what I'm thinking. She must have felt my gaze because she immediately said, If Mom is going, I'll go too. If the only person on my side at home is going, I can rest assured and go as well. It was decided we would spend the night at a woodsy resort hotel that weekend. Once we finished touring the famous spots in the area, my mother-in-law wanted us to stop by a mineral spring spa. They say that the treatments offered there are really effective for hip pain. It's somewhere deep in the mountains, but let's go and see. Of course, my husband also immediately agreed to this too. Magdalena and I had no choice but to go along with what they said. The trip started according to my mother-in-law's plans, but once again she showed her arrogance. You drive. Alex was at work all day yesterday and is tired. I was also at work yesterday, I thought to myself, but I couldn't say it out loud. Things would just get annoying if I did. Along the way, my mother-in-law needed to use the toilet, so we stopped at a shopping center for a toilet break. She then began looking at souvenir shops, buying drinks, and so on. She took her time, while the rest of us just waited. This slowed us down a lot, so by the time we had finished our sightseeing and were heading to the spa she wanted to visit, it was already getting dark. The spa was somewhere that didn't appear on the car's GPS, so my mother-in-law sat in the passenger seat and gave me directions. Mom, are you okay driving here? It's already super dark. Magdalena seemed worried, but my mother-in-law wanted us to go no matter what, so she wouldn't listen. We've come this far already. Let's see it. Magdalena, don't say things that'll just ruin the mood. Alec was dozing off, so he didn't say anything. Magdalena's mood immediately soured. The atmosphere in the car got even heavier than it already was, when my mother-in-law suddenly exclaimed, Ah, we're here! Turning on the car's high beams, I saw there was a building ahead of us. All the lights are off. They're probably already closed. Let's go and see. It was already dark out, and they were obviously not open, but she was being pushy as always. Hurry up,
When I tell you to do something, you should get moving. I held myself back from saying that I'm not her maid. I got out of the car and Magdalena followed, since she was too worried to let me go alone. Afraid of the darkness around us, Magdalena and I walked to the building. It wasn't a spa or anything. It was just an old abandoned building. That moment, we noticed that the car lights that had been pointing at us until then were beginning to move. Looking at the car, we saw that Alec had woken up and was sitting in the driver's seat, driving the car with a spiteful smile on his face. His mother had the same smile on her face. "Hey, wait!"
Shut up. Spend a night here to get yourself together. This is what happens when you treat me, the head of the house, poorly.
It was hard to believe that that was the Alec I married. Magdalena and I froze. Alec's mother stuck her head out the passenger window. "You and I aren't actually blood related, so you don't belong in our family trip. You should be grateful we drove you here. Enjoy." She can do what she wants to me, but I can't forgive her for involving my daughter in this. I was about to explode from anger. "Mom?" Magdalena looked up at me uncertainly, so I softly patted Magdalena's head in order to comfort her and pulled out my cell phone to check whether I had signal. Though it was weak, I luckily had enough signal to call the reception of the lodge we were supposed to stay at that night. The lodge staff are locals that know the area well, so they understood where we were and arrived with the police in no time. They took us to a nearby hospital just in case, but we were perfectly fine apart from some bug bites. So we then went to the lodge. When we got to the lodge, Magdalena looked left and right worriedly. "Mom, it looks like Dad and Grandma aren't here." "Yeah, I'm the one who made the reservation, so they don't know about this place." "That's right. I was the one who made all the plans for this trip. Alec and his mother didn't help at all, so I genuinely wondered where they planned on going after they left us behind." At that moment, I noticed I had a fearsome voicemail from Alec and his mother on my phone. I called them back, only to hear Alec's voice booming from the other end of the line.
"Hey, what hotel did you reserve? Tell me immediately."
"Huh. Why should I share that information with the people who abandoned Magdalena and I in the middle of nowhere in the mountains? You really thought ahead, leaving us behind without asking about the hotel like that?"
"That's because all you do is rebel against Mom. It's a 3-day weekend, so all hotels are fully booked. We'll have to sleep in the car at this rate."
"I don't care. You realize that the way you abandoned us in the mountains is a crime." After I replied coldly, Alec's mother quickly got on the line. "It's already time for dinner. If you don't tell us soon, we won't be able to eat." The two of them arrogantly seemed to have completely forgotten the fact that they had abandoned Magdalena and I. I told them the name of our hotel. "Why would you tell them? It's better to just leave them alone." "Don't worry, leave this to me." I lightly stroked my daughter's head and then called the police. "Hello? My mother-in-law and husband, who left us in the woods, seem to be headed to the lodge now. Yes, please come soon." It's so lucky that I still had enough service to get in touch with the lodge. Who knows what would have happened otherwise? Though we got through this safely, I can't forgive Alec and his mother for putting our lives at risk like that. Without hesitating, I left the police to catch the two of them. Magdalena and I were relaxing in our room when we got a call from the front desk. When we reached the reception, we saw the unbelievable scene of Alec and his mother getting apprehended by the police as a group of bystanders watched in confusion. "We're customers. Why are we getting taken by the police?" Unlike Alec, who stood pale and frozen at the sight of the police, his mother was screeching in a piercing voice and fighting against the officers. Abandoning us, and especially Magdalena, who was still a child, was a crime. When the police said that aloud, Alec's mother fell silent for a moment, but her mouth hadn't completely shut. "We did that because Christina told us to leave them there. Of course I was against it, but she forced us to." The officers had a pained look on their faces as they listened to her obvious lies. The officers seemed confused at what to do, since they couldn't be too rough with an elderly woman. "In that case, please check the dash cam on the car. The camera also records audio,
so you should be able to understand everything." When I said that, Alec collapsed on his knees.
"I'm so sorry. I got a bit hot-headed. I know what I did was wrong, so please forgive me."
Seeing him on his hands and knees didn't make me waver, even the slightest bit. He's only doing that because he feels like he's at risk. What a joke. Just like a scene from a movie, the police said,
"Let's hear more about this in the station,"
and pulled Alec and his mother into their patrol car. In order to not risk them returning, I canceled the room I had reserved for Alec's mother. I firmly told the reception staff to not let the two of them in at all costs. My daughter and I then had a lavish meal and an amazing spa session at the hotel. Though Magdalena was moody and rebellious at home, she was in a great mood the whole time. As we were falling asleep, she said to me, "I want to live together, just the two of us. Is that okay?" "We'll probably have to live in a much smaller apartment than our home now." "That's fine. I don't want to be with them anymore." Hearing that, I made my decision. After our fun little trip, Magdalena and I returned home safely. I packed our things and then went to City Hall to receive divorce forms. Since I hadn't filed for damages, and since Alec's mother cried their entire time in the police station, they also returned home eventually. Ignoring his mother's immediate harsh words upon seeing me, I handed Alec the divorce papers. "I don't want to deal with you two anymore. Let's divorce." Upset, Alec apologized for everything he had done. On the other hand, his mother, who obviously didn't feel bad at all, continued to glare at me. "All we did was leave you in the mountains once, and you want a divorce? You better stay put in this house." She continued to verbally harass me, but I ignored everything. That weekend, Magdalena and I toured rental agencies and signed a contract for an apartment for us to live together in.
"What I did was wrong. I need you in my life, Christina. Please come back to me."
"It doesn't matter if I'm there or not, does it? We're not related by blood anyway. We're just strangers. Please enjoy living with your mother, your real family." Shrugging off my crying husband, I began moving Magdalena and I's things to our new apartment. Alex said he wouldn't agree to the divorce even if we lived apart, but when I said I would hire a lawyer, he quietly signed the papers. We split our property in half. Alec agreed to pay Magdalena's child support in a large single payment. And like that, my relationship with him and his mother ended. In order to pay off the child support, he had to sell his apartment, and they are now living in a small rental. Alec tries to meet Magdalena when her birthday or Christmas rolls around, but she refuses every time. "I don't want to meet you ever again." When Magdalena said that to Alec's face, he was so shocked it seemed like he aged 10 years in a matter of seconds. That, combined with worries about taking care of his aging mother, probably weighs down on Alec a lot. But that has nothing to do with me now. I don't want to deal with them ever again. From now on, Magdalena and I will do our best in our new lives together. Because of what happened, Magdalena and I are even closer than before. I'm sure that Magdalena will go through a teenage rebellious phase soon enough, but I'll face that head on.
My middle school daughter ignores my husband for a month after he threw the lunch she prepared away, saying it was terrible. This led to a showdown.
I thought fathers were supposed to spoil their daughters. In fact, my father spoiled me. But when it comes to my husband Andrew, it's a different story. He always acts like the master of the house and expects me to follow him obediently. He does nothing. He can't do anything. All he has is a pompous attitude. My name is Stella, and that's my husband. I am a 42-year-old housewife with a middle school daughter who has reached her sensitive adolescent years. Speaking of adolescence, it's typically the time when they become rebellious, but so far my daughter Miley hasn't shown such behavior. She always helps me, talks a lot, and is a kind and gentle girl who loves her family. I love such a daughter deeply. Of course, I wish I could say the same about my husband, but unfortunately, that's not the case.
"Hey, Miley, how long are you going to watch TV? Study, study."
I've already finished my homework and preparation.
Do you think you'll get a decent job with just that? When others are playing, that's your chance to study hard and stand out. You won't get a respectable job like mine with just that.
After this show ends.
Don't be foolish. Do it right away.
My husband is always strict with our daughter like this. Aren't fathers supposed to be affectionate and spoil their daughters? In our case, it's the opposite. I'm the one who spoils our daughter while my husband is strict. But I feel like my husband is going too far. He's not just strict, he's cold. During one exchange on a particular day.
Huh? The school festival? Why do I have to go to that kind of thing?
Everyone says their families are coming. I worked so hard on the paintings I'm going to exhibit. You should come and see it, Dad.
I don't want to. It's Sunday after all.
That's just... Something like that happened. I went to the school festival, but my husband still didn't go. I couldn't forget the slightly lonely look on our daughter's face while all her friends had their fathers there. When I got back from the festival, my husband was lying around in bed just like when I left. He's the worst. And then...
Tutoring, huh? You should be able to get into high school without relying on that.
I'm trying my best, but I'm a bit worried about my first choice. Can't you at least let me go for summer and winter break?
No way. Who do you think is going to pay for that? Don't apply to schools you can't get into on your own.
He said that too. Every time my husband speaks coldly, our daughter looks like she's about to cry, but she bites her lip and holds back. Seeing our daughter like that, and the tense atmosphere between us, I also feel sad. No matter what I say, my husband's attitude doesn't change. He just says that children should listen to their parents. It's hopeless. One day, my husband said,
Hey, start making lunch tomorrow.
Why all of a sudden?
The company cafeteria is closing for a while for renovations. Eating out or buying a boxed lunch would be expensive and wasteful. So packed lunches, okay?
Is that how you ask someone for something? Even if he says it suddenly, there's no way I can make it right away. I knew if I got irritated or complicated, my husband would get angry and start yelling. So for the time being, I arranged the leftovers from dinner into a lunchbox. But, as expected, when my husband came home from work, he started nitpicking.
Who can eat the same side dishes from last night's dinner?
It's not the same. I arranged it differently. The seasoning is completely different, you know. But I guess to my husband, all flavors are the same. I try to make it right because I don't want people to complain, but it's not easy. I thought of it as a rehearsal for when our daughter becomes a high school student and I have to make lunch every day. But my husband always just complains, so it's just stressful. At least if he showed a little gratitude. If he said it was delicious, it would make it all worth it. One day, as our life continued like this, Mom, can I make Dad's packed lunch for tomorrow? My daughter suddenly said that. Sure, but what's gotten into you all of a sudden? Well, I'm in middle school now and I'm getting interested in cooking. Dad always complains that your packed lunches are too boring, right? I think he'd be happy if I made it one that's a bit different. I see. Well then, shall we make it together? What kind of dishes are you thinking of? Well... Cooking with my daughter. I think this is one of those scenes you see in movies about families. I never thought it would happen so soon. So feeling like I was back in middle school myself, I happily made the packed lunch with my daughter. Do you think Dad will be happy? With those words, my daughter blushed a little. Despite him being such a cold father, she really is growing up to be a good kid. A warm feeling welled up in my chest. The next morning, Dad, I made today's packed lunch. My daughter eagerly spoke to my husband.
Yeah.
With a smile, my daughter handed the lunchbox to my husband. Receiving it, he remained as aloof as ever. I wonder what he'll think. Will he be pleased? It's heartwarming to see my daughter anxiously waiting for my husband's return that evening. As soon as my husband returned home, my daughter greeted him eagerly at the entrance. "Welcome home, Dad. How was the packed lunch?" It was a straightforward question right off the bat. Surely my husband would say his daughter's packed lunch was delicious. I waited for my husband's words with a smile, but...
"The packed lunch? It was bad, so I threw it away."
Huh? Did I mishear? As my husband took off his shoes and put his bag in the room to change, our daughter asked in a small voice. I hope I'm wrong. "Wait, you threw it away?"
I threw away your lunchbox."
"You didn't eat it?"
"Huh? What are you talking about? The moment I took a bite of the lunch you made, it tasted awful. I couldn't help but yell disgusting and threw it in the trash."
"What?"
"You. If you make such terrible food, who's going to marry you? Thanks to you, I ended up spending even more on food. Hey, Stella."
Yes, what?" As I was dumbfounded by my husband's words, my name was unexpectedly called, and I panicked.
"I need about $300 because my pocket money ran out this month."
"What? $300?
Since I couldn't eat the packed lunch my daughter made, I had to go to a decent diner. I'll be eating there for a while until the company cafeteria renovation is finished. I guess it's thanks to my daughter's bad lunch that I found a nice place to eat."
What a terrible thing to say. I can't believe he said that. I thought I should say something in response to such a conflict, but my daughter beat me to it. "Dad, that's mean." Seeing my daughter's tearful eyes glaring at my husband. "I worked hard to make it. It's not right to throw it away like that."
"You're the one at fault for making terrible food."
My husband said it so calmly. I couldn't stand my husband's attitude, so I argued back. "I helped make it too, and I tasted it. I think it's delicious." And it's true. Although I provided some support, my daughter made almost all of the lunch. I tasted the side dishes, and they were really delicious. Can't get married? No way, I'm sure it's a dish that could capture anyone's taste buds, regardless of gender. Honestly, I even thought it was better than my cooking. My husband said that the dishes were the same, with the same ingredients arranged and flavored differently. Even though I'm sure his taste buds are off, he refuses to admit it.
"I felt it was terrible. If you think that's delicious, you must have no taste buds. I can only think that your lack of taste passed down to our daughter."
Flipping out and insisting you're not at fault. As I was about to continue, once again my daughter beat me to it. "That doesn't mean you have to throw it out." "I hate you, Dad." My daughter stayed locked in her room, and she didn't come out until the next morning. Thus began the Cold War between my husband and daughter. Even when my husband wakes up in the morning, my daughter doesn't greet him. She doesn't respond even when spoken to. A thorough silent treatment began.
"Miley, pass me the salt." "Hey, Miley, how was your test today?" "Miley, do you know where Dad's tie was?" "Hey, Miley."
My daughter, unable to endure my husband's relentless questioning, would invariably conclude by slamming the table forcefully and effectively barricading herself away. At first, my husband was bewildered by our daughter's behavior, but his inherent stubbornness prevented him from being intimidated. It became evident that he was becoming increasingly irritable. After about a month of this situation, one day, my husband finally exploded. He tried to talk to our daughter, who was watching TV, but as usual, she continued to ignore him. Fed up, he forcefully snatched the remote control from her and turned off the TV.
"Cut it out. What's with that attitude? Do you think it's okay to ignore your father?"
Ugh. My daughter didn't respond at all. Frustrated by her behavior, my husband finally lost his temper and slammed the remote control onto the table roughly. It broke a little.
"You. Who do you think has provided for this family all this time? Who do you think raised you?"
The moment those words left his mouth, my daughter must have glared at him. Her eyes were filled with cold intensity. "Who raised me? Mom and Grandma did."
"Huh?"
He probably didn't expect such an answer to come back. My husband was speechless and froze in place. There was a brief silence during which I sighed and walked over to sit on the sofa next to my daughter. My husband is still bewildered. Miley understands everything, you know. My husband continued to stare at me, dumbfounded. Just as I sighed deeply, once again my daughter spoke up. I know everything. Mom pays for all household expenses, right?
What?
My husband looked surprised, finally realizing his situation. Did he really think no one would find out? There's no other word for it but stupid. Dad, you got laid off, and now you're working part-time jobs, right? I know.
Why would you bring that up?
I heard it from Mom.
Did you tell her?
Of course I did. There's no reason to keep quiet about it. Actually, my husband was laid off a few years ago. Naturally, our finances became tight, but fortunately my job was going well. Right after my husband got laid off, I received an offer for a full-time position at just the right time, which helped us manage to make ends meet. But it wasn't good for my husband. I wonder if he got too comfortable relying on my income, as he didn't bother to search for a proper job and instead kept switching between temporary jobs. He acted all high and mighty about the company cafeteria, but it was just a lie to hide that he was tired of convenience store lunches. Perhaps he wanted to shield our daughter from the truth out of stubbornness. It's a pity. I was fed up with my husband's arrogant behavior, so I told our daughter the truth. Dad, you're the worst.
Why are you saying that?
My daughter looking at her father with disdain, and my husband looking at me with bewilderment. There's no way I wouldn't say it. I know Mom works hard to earn money, and Grandma helps with our daily life.
Why are you bringing my mom into this?
My husband still seems to be struggling to grasp the situation. Because I asked for her help. When my husband got laid off, our daughter was still in elementary school. It would have been nice if my husband, who had spare time, could have taken care of our daughter, but of course, he refused. He would say things like,
I'm busy with job hunting.
Even though he wasn't really searching for a job properly. We had trouble finding an after-school program for our daughter to attend, but thankfully my mother came to the rescue. Thanks to her, our daughter could spend her afternoons at our nearby family home, and I could focus on work with peace of mind. To help me, she frequently prepared dinner. The dishes she cooked were delicious, as she had learned from her grandmother during that time. We've relied on Grandma's help as well, not just Mom. Dad, not knowing about that means he doesn't care about us, right? Can we even call him a father? And he's never thanked Mom, has he? He's really awful. You're always asking Mom for money, but where did your own earnings go?
Well, there's a deep reason for that.
Is that deep reason related to this debt? As my husband tried to make excuses, I handed him a document I've been holding on to. A cash loan agreement.
Where did you get this?
It was just sitting on the desk in the bedroom.
You shouldn't go snooping around.
Of course we'd look. If there's a loan agreement with my husband as the borrower, of course I'm going to look. It'd be strange not to. I thought my eyes were going to pop out when I saw the amount written there. It wasn't just a few $1,000s. It was several tens of thousands. What did you use it for?
Ugh.
My husband fell silent. At that moment, our daughter slammed the table. It seemed like my husband's body lifted slightly off the ground. What did you use it for, Dad?
Gambling?
Why does your answer sound like a question? Well, I had a feeling, but both my daughter and I were astonished. Despite his pompous,
Who do you think?
talk, he ended up like this. It's beyond pathetic. Dad, you're really the worst. It's unimaginable to have a parent like this. It's embarrassing, pathetic.
Ugh.
Even my husband, unable to argue back, remains silent as the debt is exposed to daylight. I handed him a piece of paper, piling on. Please, sign this.
What's this? Divorce papers?
Throwing away our daughter's lunch was the trigger for considering divorce, but it's unforgivable, but if that were the only reason, I wouldn't have decided on divorce. But now it's different. Blaming others and acting superior to the family is just plain arrogant. Not contributing to the living expenses and greedily spending all our earned money on yourself. and finally gambling and burdening us with massive debt. Hiding it all and repeatedly boasting about your own pride? Such foolishness. Are there people like that?
Maybe I need it as a form of healing?
Once again, he says something foolish in response to my question. Healing? Like that could ever happen. Well, in that case, please go back that way. I thrust half of the divorce papers towards my husband.
Huh? Go back? But this is my home, isn't it?
I glare at my flustered husband and push the divorce documents towards him. Your parents are already aware of the situation. When the time comes, please take care of it. Please feel free to return to your parents' home. Also, you need to sign the divorce papers and send them to me.
Huh? You've told my parents too?
Of course. I told them as soon as I found out about the debt. Get out quickly.
No, I don't want to. My
husband crumbled before my eyes, but then he quickly looked up towards our daughter.
Miley, is this okay with you? Dad's going away, you know. From now on, I'll change my ways. You can watch TV and I'll do whatever you want.
He clung to that. My daughter calmly dismissed my husband. Well, Dad, since you only work occasionally, you have a lot of free time, right? TV is obvious. Besides, Mom bought that TV in the first place.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can go to tutoring too.
So, Mom's paying for my tutoring too. I've been going there already.
Huh?
Mom's the one giving the money. She said it's okay for me to go, so I'm attending now.
What?
It's only natural. What's the point of being a parent if you don't do things to help your hard-working daughter? So, Dad?
Yes?
With a beaming smile, my daughter waved goodbye to her father. Bye-bye, she declared, bidding her farewell. Smiling, my daughter waved her hand while my husband wore a look of despair. I'm sure I'll never forget it. Afterward, my husband returned to his parents' home, but my in-laws, who heard my side of the story, were apparently furious and lectured him all night. They paid off the debts and agreed to cover our daughter's expenses after the divorce. Although I initially declined, worrying about their retirement funds, I decided to accept their reassuring response.
It's okay. We'll make sure our son repays it.
While I am employed full-time, I was honestly anxious about the future. Even though things are okay for now, sending my daughter to university will require a significant amount of money. So, I accepted their offer sincerely. With the support of my in-laws, I was able to divorce my husband safely. As for that ex-husband of mine, he was first kicked out of his parents' home and forced to live alone in a rundown apartment. Reportedly, he spends his days doing manual labor under his parents' supervision, getting whipped figuratively. Yeah, that's not enough, so he has to work as a security guard at night. That rundown apartment is just a place to sleep. Well, considering all the freedom he had before, I guess you could say he's getting what he deserves. As for my daughter and me, we are enjoying fulfilling days freed from that reckless husband. My daughter is attending her top choice high school every day with a smile. Whenever I see her smile, I know I made the right choice.
Exhausted by solo parenting and caregiving, I said, I've hit my limit. But my husband went on a trip. I snapped and then, lol.
I can't take it anymore. I just want to run away, I said, overwhelmed by solo parenting, caring for my father-in-law and managing both my husband and mother-in-law's needs along with the housework. As I struggled to keep up, my husband Jackson announced,
I'm going to take a trip abroad to clear my head.
And left. I wondered why I had to manage everything alone. Just then, a warm hand gently rested on my shoulder as I cried. My name is Jill, a 31-year-old stay-at-home mom. I've been married to Jackson for 4 years, and we just had our first child last year. I was planning to return to work when our baby turned 1, but then I was called to my in-laws, which is a 30-minute drive away. The place is a bit tricky to get to by train, and traveling by public transportation with a baby is tough. I asked Jackson to drive us, but he insisted on taking the train because
gas prices are high and it's easier by train.
When I asked if he would help carry our many things along with the baby, he retorted,
Why should I? That's a mother's job.
I refused. I thought that he might help if I was visibly struggling, but I guess I had overestimated him. Even when I was exhausted from carrying the baby and our heavy luggage, He didn't even glance my way. His own bag was just his wallet and phone stuffed into his pockets. Despite this, he didn't help, and even hurried me along, saying,
"If you dawdle, I will leave you behind."
I had suspected he wouldn't be much help, but this was disappointing beyond belief. I had hoped he'd change once our baby grew older and started calling him Dad, but I told myself to stop hoping. For now, my focus was just to reach his parents' house quickly. When I finally arrived, after Jackson, his mother, Linda, immediately snapped. "You're late. What took you so long?" It was just really crowded. I almost blurted out if someone had helped me with the luggage, but before I opened my mouth, she cut me off. "Just come in already. Seriously, I've been waiting forever." And she hurried back inside, leaving me alone with the baby and all our stuff. Linda has always been cold to me, and even at her house, it was the same. "Oh, you're here," she'd say, barely acknowledging me. But now that I was holding her grandchild, she couldn't completely ignore me, though her attitude was still frosty. Inside, Jackson was already lounging on the sofa, absorbed in his phone. "Where's your dad?" I asked, expecting to see my father-in-law, Scott, sitting in his usual spot, but Linda replied, "He's not here." "Not here?" I echoed. "That's what I called you here to talk about. Jackson, you listen too," she demanded, though he barely looked up from his phone as he mumbled.
"Huh? Oh, okay."
She continued without his attention. "Scott has hurt his leg and is in the hospital." "He's hospitalized?" I was shocked to hear this. Jackson finally looked up briefly, but then returned his gaze to his phone. "Well, he's getting older. He fell down the stairs and can't walk. But it's just a broken leg, so he won't be in the hospital for long." "Ah, that's good to hear," I responded, relieved it wasn't more serious. But then Linda's news took a turn for the worse. "The doctor says it'll probably take a long time before he can walk properly again. In other words, he'll be bedridden." "What?" My in-laws had married late, and they were already old when they had Jackson. I knew they were in their 70s, but I had thought they were still quite healthy. This is going to be tough. "So you need to help us." "Okay." When I mentioned how tough it would be for him to move around on his own, Linda coldly asked for help. As I looked at her quizzically, she said, "I can't manage this by myself. Jackson, you both need to help out. That's why we'll be moving into your apartment." "What?" I exclaimed, taken aback by the suddenness of her announcement. But it seemed I was the only one surprised. Jackson casually accepted.
"Sure, we have the space."
"Wait, Jackson?" I protested, but Linda was already pleased. "I knew you'd say that. I've actually already arranged for the movers." "What?" "They'll be here tomorrow." "Wait, what?" I was overwhelmed by the rapid developments. Jackson was nonchalant.
"Sure thing."
And Linda smiled warmly. I was completely left out of the decision-making. What kind of family is this? In the end, after dealing with a crying baby and unable to discuss the situation further, I had to leave. Of course, Jackson didn't help on the way back either, quickly making his way home. Will everything be okay? I couldn't help but worry, and my worries would prove justified. Once we started living together, Linda bombarded me with demands. "Jill, Scott is calling you. You haven't cleaned up. Do the dishes already. Can you go shopping? I'm tired. Give me a massage. I'm hungry. Make some food." I'm not your wife. Actually, even if I were, please do these yourself. I thought, but couldn't say it. I just didn't have the energy or strength to speak up. Jackson continued to live carefree, lounging and messing with his phone as if nothing had changed. And then he'd say the same things as his mother.
"I'm hungry."
Meanwhile, I struggled daily with household chores while carrying the baby, and then Linda would say, "Scott needs to go to the bathroom," adding the care of my recuperating father-in-law to my duties. I had hoped she would at least take care of her own husband, but no such luck. Like mother, like son, They both did as they pleased.
I'm sorry, Jill.
Scott would say, the only one who seemed to appreciate my efforts. If not for his gratitude, I probably would have broken down completely. Jill, the crock pot isn't heating up. Sorry, could you turn on the switch for me? Do it yourself, she said and laughed heartily as she watched TV. Jackson then said,
Hey, Jill. I'm going on a business trip starting tomorrow. Get everything ready.
Sorry, making baby food is taking up all my time. You need to do it yourself.
What? Who do you think provides for us? You can handle that much, can't you? You're useless.
And then he started using his phone. Right then, the baby on my back started crying, probably needing a diaper change. My hair was a mess, and I couldn't even remember the last day I hadn't worn these clothes. The laundry was everywhere, unfolded. I also hadn't had the chance to clean, so trash was scattered all around. Linda, seeing this, yelled at me to clean up. Seriously, what kind of punishment is this? Did I do something bad in a past life? My mental and physical energy was on the brink of collapse.
I'm really sorry, Jill, and thank you for everything. I'll get through rehab and start walking soon.
It's okay, Scott. Just rest for now. Trying to rush things could make it worse. His kind words touched my heart, but I was truly at my limit. The baby's nighttime crying and my lack of sleep were just too much. Late at night, I held the sleeping baby tightly, barely conscious, making sure not to drop her. My husband would complain about the noise and kick the baby and me out of the bedroom, sleeping peacefully alone. Linda was also sleeping soundly alone in a room separate from Scott. Achoo! Despite it warming up, the nights were still chilly. I kept the baby warm to prevent a cold, but I often neglected my own care. I sighed deeply, thinking how this must be the reality for mothers everywhere. Looking outside the window, I dreaded another hectic day beginning. Morning came without a wink of sleep for me. Oh, I slept so well, said my refreshed-looking husband and mother-in-law. Then Jackson complained.
What? No breakfast ready yet?
Without even a good morning. I was fed up. What would happen if I just left this house? Though I thought about it, I knew I couldn't. I mean, how could I even make a living? With no parents or siblings to turn to and no energy to even think about job hunting, my biggest concern was Scott. I couldn't care less about Jackson and Linda, but I couldn't leave Scott behind. If I left, they wouldn't take care of him. I didn't even want to think about what would happen next. What to do? Achoo! As I was about to grumble, another sneeze came out due to staying up late.
Gross. You got a cold? You better not give it to me.
Shockingly, these were my husband's words. What a lack of compassion. I wanted to slap the me who thought he was cool and charming before we got married. I can't take it anymore. I want to escape this life, I muttered, but escaping reality wasn't an option. I gently laid the sleeping baby in bed and slowly made my way to the kitchen. After making breakfast for the two of them, it would be Scott's turn, and then my husband said,
Oh, by the way, Mom and I are going on a trip tomorrow.
Say what? I turned around to his smirking face. What did you just say?
Yeah, we're going on a trip tomorrow, just the two of us.
Just the two of you?
Yeah, it's not relaxing at all here, with a baby being fussy and you bustling around. We're going overseas for a change of scenery.
Seriously? What was he thinking? He was the most relaxed person in the house, and yet he talked as if he needed a break, and overseas no less. Exactly, Linda agreed. Honestly, dealing with an incompetent daughter-in-law is such a drag. It'll be tough for you with us gone. I almost said I wouldn't mind at all, but I stayed silent. Then grinning, Linda said, Take good care of Scott and the house while we're gone. We're going to stretch our wings for a bit. Watching them excitedly discuss their trip, it felt like something inside me was breaking. Then they left me, the baby, and Scott, and went on their trip. Jackson had apparently taken paid leave and they wouldn't be back for a week. Whatever, I don't care anymore, I thought as I saw them off. How could they think they have a hard time when I'm the one working the hardest? How could they treat me this badly? I'm such a fool for trying so hard, I said as tears began to fall. I tried to stop them but couldn't. Once the tears started, they wouldn't stop. I needed to pull myself together. I was a mother after all. Look, the baby is crying. I needed to go and hold her, but I couldn't move. What a failure I was. Just then, the baby's crying stopped. Huh? I looked up, surprised, and felt something warm on my shoulder. Looking over, it was Scott sitting beside me, patting my shoulder. He smiled gently at my sleeping baby. Scott?
I'm so sorry, Jill. Thank you for all your hard work.
You can walk?
Well, more like crawling. Looks like I might be able to have a crawling race with my grandchild.
He joked with a gentle smile.
You don't need to try so hard anymore.
But
I'm getting better at moving a bit on my own. I'll take care of myself and help around the house as much as I can.
Oh, Scott.
You don't have to try so hard anymore.
He reassured me, patting my back like a real father, and I couldn't help but cry out loud. I didn't have to try so hard anymore. In that moment, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. A week later, the sound of the baby's cries filled the house. Hold on, I'm coming, I said as I hurried. But then I heard Scott's voice.
It's okay, I'll change your diaper.
Peeking in, I saw him humming as he changed the diaper, and relieved, I went back to finish my lunch. A leisurely meal, how wonderful. Just then, my phone rang. It was my husband. Hello?
Where the hell are you?
Jackson yelled, his first words to me since returning. I could hear the fury in his voice over the phone. Where? I'm at home. I replied calmly.
When we got back to the apartment, it was empty.
That's because I moved out.
You moved?
His surprise was understandable. Right now, he and his mother must be standing dumbfounded in front of an empty, spotless room.
When did you move?
When? Right after you two went on your trip.
What the hell? Get back here now.
I can't, I've already canceled the lease.
You canceled it?
Well, it's not immediate. We have until the end of next month. You can stay there till then. Just keep it clean, I said, managing the situation with ease.
Why would you cancel it on your own?
I can do what I want. After all, that apartment was mine to begin with. Indeed, I had rented that apartment since before we were married. Back when I was single and earning a decent income, I chose a reasonably spacious apartment because I didn't like cramped spaces. When we got married, I just continued living there. Of course, Jackson had never paid the rent.
You rented it, so you should pay for it,
he said, expecting me to bear the costs, as usual. And by the way, the same goes for the utility bills. I had been covering them with my savings since I left my job after giving birth. Forgot about that, did you? Who do you think you owe your living to? You said, but really, who do you owe it to? I challenged him, since he rarely contributed financially. At this, he fell silent, unable to respond. On the other end of the phone, Linda shouted, Jill, what on earth do you think you're doing? Oh, Linda, did you enjoy your trip abroad? Were you as lazy there as you are here? That's none of your business. You're right, it has nothing to do with me. And it will continue to have nothing to do with me, so please don't contact me again. I cut her off sharply. What do you mean by that? I'm saying I'm getting a divorce. Once Jackson and I are divorced, you and I will be strangers. I won't have any obligation to take care of you. Apparently my words have been heard on speakerphone because I heard Jackson exclaim,
Divorce?
I don't need a husband who does nothing around the house, doesn't care for the baby, shows no interest, and lacks even a speck of consideration for me.
How will you live without me?
I'll live more peacefully without you.
How will you manage without my income?
Don't worry about that. I've already started looking for a job.
What about the kid?
I'm also looking for daycare. I informed him, which seemed to shake him.
Where do you find the time for that?
He stuttered. Are you finally understanding just how busy I am, and I don't even have time to look for a job or daycare? I pointed out his hypocrisy.
Well, I guess.
So you understand that, yet you do nothing around the house and you go on a trip abroad to change your scenery? He was speechless. Do you think this marriage is beneficial to me? I pressed him. And he remained silent, which was all the answer I needed. What a fool. But from behind that fool, his mother shouted again. Jill, what about Scott? She yelled, realizing that Scott's presence was missing from the empty apartment.
Don't worry, I'm with Jill,
Scott calmly declared over the line. Honey? She was stunned.
I'm fed up with you.
What are you saying?
So we might as well get divorced too.
What?
Contact me on my cell when you find a new place. We'll have our lawyers handle this.
Wait, please, don't leave me.
What are you saying? I'm not leaving you.
What?
I'm just throwing out the trash. A wife who neglects her husband.
He stated sharply, and then he moved toward the kids' room. Silence followed on the other end of the phone. She might be shocked into silence. Hello? I called out.
Yes.
Jackson replied weakly, his voice devoid of energy. As your father mentioned, I'd like to discuss the divorce through lawyers.
Okay.
Be ready to discuss alimony and child support.
Alimony? I understand child support, but why alimony?
Because of the mental distress you've caused.
But
you what? I pressed, waiting for him to justify his actions against my mental anguish. But silence followed. Nothing then? Well, that figures. After all, living freely by his whims, what suffering could he possibly claim? Everything you've done, or rather haven't done, is documented daily.
What?
I heard keeping a diary can be beneficial during divorce proceedings. It was supposed to be for recording our baby's growth, but it's been useful to document your lack of action. Or should I say your absence? Either way, it's clear you haven't done anything to help.
I'm sorry.
He finally admitted guilt.
My bad. I'll start taking care of our son and helping around the house, so...
You'll take care of who? I interrupted.
Our son.
Really? Son, huh? How do you care for a child who doesn't exist? I took a deep breath and said, Our baby is a girl. Forgetting even the gender of your own baby? Are you out of your mind? I yelled at him.
What? You said during the pregnancy it was a boy.
That was a mistake by the doctor because of the baby's position during the ultrasound. Do you even remember your daughter's name? That's why you're confused about the gender.
Oh, I do. It's a gender-neutral name. Ryan.
It's Riley, he shouted and hung up the phone. I was so upset that I even turned off the phone. Although I still need to be in contact with him for now, I plan to block his number once everything is settled. I can't believe he even got our baby's gender wrong. Normally that wouldn't happen, but it just shows how little he interacted with our baby. He never changed a diaper, never held her. Not even once did I see him call her by her name. It's pathetic how I ended up marrying such a loser. Later, thanks to an acquaintance of my father-in-law, we were able to hire a skilled lawyer to handle our divorces. Scott and Linda called nonstop, but I ignored everything except what was necessary. Eventually, both our divorces were finalized. I made sure that my ex-husband paid the alimony and child support in one lump sum, stating that otherwise he wouldn't see his daughter again. He does have visiting rights after all. I thought he would request to pay in installments, but surprisingly, he accepted the lump sum payment. It must have been a shock to him, not just a divorce, but also realizing he had misunderstood his baby's gender. It's too late for regrets now. Linda begged Scott to the very end, but their marriage was already beyond repair and the divorce proceeded. The division of assets went in his favor since she had squandered much of their money on overseas trip and other expenses. Now penniless, my ex-husband and his mother, who lives off a small pension, had to move into a cheap rundown apartment together. My daughter and I are happily living with Scott in our new home. He initially could only crawl, but gradually he's been able to stand and now he can walk reasonably well with a cane. It's endearing to see him improve his mobility around the same time my daughter started to crawl and then walk. He is clearly delighted.
One day we'll go for a walk together,
he said, and my daughter, whether she understood or not, replied, yes, and smiled sweetly. While it's good to work hard, I've learned that overdoing it isn't beneficial. I've recently re-entered the workforce, but I made sure to rely on daycares and public services without hesitation. If I'm happy and smiling, I know my daughter will be too.